Good evening, Shelby. It's so nice to see you today.
Thank you.
How
Thanks
is
for
your
having me. Oh my gosh.
always
Exciting.
welcome to the party. I feel like you're like in my living room, I'm in yours. Like it's so good to just get to hang out with you on this Saturday evening. And you had a busy day. You worked today.
Yes. Yes, a
How's
very
that?
long day. It was good. I work for the Fayetteville Public Library. I'm the fabrication and robotics coordinator for the Center for Innovation. So I oversee a lab that has five 3D printers, now three resin printers, a Epilog laser which can cut and engrave different materials, and then we also have a Snap 3-in-1 that can be a 3D printer, a laser, or a CNC router. So if you're ever in the Fayetteville area, stop on in, see what we're up to.
Wow. So this is a language that I can't even speak. There were so many words like sounds legit, but it's so impressive to me, right? Like I don't know about you, but when I grew up, the library was maybe like 1,000 square feet under the town hall. I remember like the smell of it, like reminding me of like the rubber stairs that you went down to get like the. I just like have such a vivid image of the smell, if which is weird, but it's nothing like the Fayetteville Public Library, which has an innovation center,
No, yeah,
five
not at all.
3D
Yeah,
printers.
it's phenomenal. And just my lab is one facet of the innovation center. There's also a full recording studio, a green screen studio, with professional cameras and audio equipment that you can check out. There's also a professional photography studio with different backdrops, a podcasting booth, which you might be interested in the future.
I
Would love to give
love
you a
the idea.
tour.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
A
That'll have to be
stu-
a follow up.
Yeah, and then a studio where you can do all the editing and things. We have a full Mac lab with the Adobe Creative Suite and all of the editing software, and then a heat press, which also is associated with my lab. And then on top of that, we also have simulators. So we have a car simulator, a forklift simulator, an airplane simulator, a cat simulator, and then a truck driving simulator that can also act as a bus simulator. In the future, we're applying for a grant where we can hire an instructor, and then people can start to get their CDL hours actually on the equipment. So
Mind
in the
blowing.
future, it's coming.
So cool. I think that, libraries have always existed to kind of fill gaps in people's access to education or resources or just like doing and learning. And I feel like Fayetteville Public Library just like lets that credo kind of evolve with the times, which is great.
Yeah, it really feels like the Fayetteville Public Library has expanded what a library is. So it's no longer just about the book resource, it's about all resources. And eventually, like, they used to have a tool library where you could rent out tools and equipment and things. That'll eventually come online, probably, hopefully, next year. I know that's been slow rolling with COVID and everything, but yeah, yeah.
What an
And I've had
exciting
and I've
place.
had tons of patrons come into my lab for different things, and they're like, "Man, I never thought I would say on a Saturday that I was telling my wife during breakfast I'm going to go to the library. I never thought that would be a thing." So, yeah, yeah, a lot
That
of
is so
workforce. Yeah.
cool. It's an exciting place, and I think they are so fortunate to have you, who are just an exciting and talented person. And we talked just now about, just like evolving the definition of library. Before we started recording, you and I were speaking about evolving, where we decide art goes, right, and how it takes up space. And so I'm really looking forward to learning what that means for you and your work today. For those who don't know you, though, I'm pretty sure a lot of people do. And this is Shelby Fleming, sculptor extraordinaire. And I just can't wait to get into it and know more about who you are. So, what we like to do at the start is go through someone's, personal background. Who were you, Shelby, growing up? Like, where did you play? What did you like to do? Were you always thinking about, the body and how it shows up and what it means? Or kind of where did the origins of your interest, like, kind of fit into your story?
What's my origin story?
What's your origin story? Let's hear your origin story.
So I'll tell you what I tell everyone at the beginning of my artist talks is I'm from the land of the condiments. So I grew up in Collinsville, Illinois.
Wow.
It is home to the world's largest supplier of horseradish. Supplies the whole world's horseradish. It's all grown there. So we had exposed to a lot of horseradish festivals. And then also it is home to the world's tallest ketchup bottle, which is a water tower. So Heinz used to have a plant there right off the railroad tracks, and they just have a ketchup bottle as advertisement, and it's a water tower. So
Oh my gosh.
yeah, and then it was founded by I think it was the Polish, so we would have Italian Fest too. So kind of some of those cultural backgrounds coming from, but grew up in the land of the corn is what I also say. Just surrounded by a lot of cornfields, pretty flat. I went to Southern Illinois University of Edwardsville for my undergraduate degree. I thought, oh, I'm going to teach art, and I'm such a 2D artist. I'm such a drawer. And then I had my first sculpture class with Thad Duwag, which completely changed my life. He's such a amazing mentor. I cannot say enough. He's going to make me tear up. He's phenomenal. He's one of those people that just changes everyone's life that he touches. Just incredible instructor, and I was on the road of like art education, and I ran into some hiccups because I'm dyslexic, so a lot of the testing for a lot of the testing I couldn't get accommodations, so I decided, well, I'm just going to get a BFA in sculpture, and then I'm going to go get my master's, so that then I can go and teach. So I was like, I'm going to take the long road if I can't get accommodations. So that's the weird, rocky road that led me to graduate school and to be at the University of Arkansas for my graduate degree. So I went from Southern Illinois University, had 6 months off, worked as a waterer for Lowe's. Apparently that's a job. I made bank, and I was like, why didn't I do that the whole time I was in undergrad? Moved for graduate school, started graduate school, and then ended up graduating in the middle of COVID. And then I created my whole thesis show titled Gut Feeling, which is all about the viewer's experience and interaction with the art pieces. And then COVID hit, and no one got to see it. I installed the whole exhibit only to document it. Unfortunately, to this day, it is just hanging out in someone's garage. So if anyone listening has a giant space they would like giant intestines to inhabit for a little while, please let me know. So then we went from, gut feeling in graduate school. And then I started my position at the Scott Family Amazeum, building exhibits, basically building children's exhibits, fixing exhibits, and then CAD modeling new exhibits. So there's a whole exhibit that will probably debut sometime next year that is all just hanging out in a CAD model right now, which is crazy to think about. I can't wait until it's birthed into the world. And then I just started my position at the Fayetteville Public Library 3 months ago. And that's kind of my origin story. I can go into more details about growing up, but
no, that's a beautiful starting point, and I feel like you're hitting all the pillars of Northwest Arkansas with the Amazeum, with the library, with the U of A. Had you been to Arkansas before you started your master's here? Were you super excited about this city of Fayetteville? How did you?
So I looped my mom into going to the grand graduate tour, which my professor Thad had recommended. He's like, if you're going to graduate school, you're going to live there for 3 years. You might want to look at it first and know that you like where you're going to be living. And I was like, that's a really good point. So we did the good old graduate tour. I looped my mom in because I was said, we'll stop in Florida as the last stop. So we went to University of Oklahoma, Arkansas, and then ended at Tuscaloosa. Actually, they had a really neat program set up too, and then we ended up at the beach conveniently. So and then I just and we actually drove from Oklahoma here, and it was pitch black at night, foggy, as it is around here in the middle of the night sometimes in the summer. And then we came out of the hotel in the morning, had no clue how hilly it was. It was just gorgeous. And I was like, oh my God. Because one of the things I wanted out of graduate school was I wanted hills, because a lot of my undergraduate work really got influenced by the Tennessee hill landscape. We took a trip there and did a lot of hiking in Chattanooga. And it really changed my work and how I pictured the undulation in some of the earlier forms that I was carving, and just how the landscape rolled. And I was like, I need to be somewhere that's not in cornfields anymore. So that was one of the motivations for really choosing Northwest Arkansas, was just how gorgeous it was. And then also like touring the School of Art and seeing the new sculpture building was phenomenal. They have an amazing setup. The wood shop is the wood and metal shop were just massive. Like they're the size, like one of those rooms is the size of my whole entire sculpture department in my undergrad. So it's an incredible building, and that really sold it, was having access to, new equipment. And then also that's when I got into digital fabrication with Vincent Edwards. He's the digital fabrication instructor for the School of Art, and took a lot of his classes, and learned all the things that I needed to do my job currently. So learned about lasers, 3D printers, and CNC routers, and how to prep those files. So and that led a lot to the construction of Gut Feeling too, because a lot of those forms I actually CAD modeled in advance. So I knew how to build them and how large to make them too. Because I CAD model and designed the whole gallery, and then kind of fit the forms in there so that I knew that they would fit, one, and then two, so that it would cohesively all go together as one piece. So
That's awesome. What a special like journey to this point, and it like fits together so nicely. I am picking up from the way you're describing CAD modeling that maybe it's like I'm picturing like an interior designer like figuring out how they're going to decorate like a living room, right? So they're going to like have a, I don't know, maybe a like blueprint of it on their computer and like put little pieces of furniture in it. Is that what CAD modeling is like, or like what is?
Kind of. So CAD modeling, you can really design anything in it. If you think about like architectural buildings, they'll build it in a CAD model first so that they can show their clients what the building is going to look like, and then you can easily model or change things before you start ordering the wood or the metal. In this case, it was just kind of playing with how the forms were going to develop, because all of the forms in the Gut Feeling show have a metal understructure armature on the bottom. So I needed to know how much steel I needed in order to construct all of these. And then to make this like super fast, because I only had a year to build this whole show because it was my thesis. I actually used those models and parceled out each individual understructure ring, what diameter of ring I needed. So then I would just bend all the rings. And then I actually used the CNC. I put a Sharpie in the CNC head, and I actually had it draw the profile line. And then I actually bent the steel to follow that line. So that's how those are constructed, actually. Yeah. So, and then Vincent was like, oh man, you could have used augmented reality to help you sculpt it in space. And I was like, dude, my brain can't go that far yet, but
we're using all the abstract futuristic things. We do not need to
it's insane. But it's also like there was a lot of people on my thesis committee that had weren't in sculpture. So a lot of it was trying to explain how it was going to look before, it was in the same place of like trying to convince a client of like, this is how we're going to build it. I also had to like talk to my committee and be like, this is how I'm going to build it. This is what it's going to look like. So it was almost like trying to sell it too. So
many cool like skills that you got to glean from that one major year-long experience. You mentioned that at the Amazium you were doing like exhibit design stuff, right? And I think was that part of your like formal education in your master's program? It seems like your thesis like accomplished that education, right? Of exhibit design because of how massive it was. But I wondered, did you have to take courses in that too, or how did that kind of become part of your story?
Yeah, so a lot of that position, I just saw that like welding and wood carving was a big part of it, and then CAD modeling was on the lower end, and I was like, I could do this. The main thing was just like they use different software than what I was used to. So we used Rhino 5 is a CAD modeling software. That's the one that we used at the university. And then switching to the Amazium, they used Fusion 360. which is way, way more like you got to know how you're going to build it before you actually build it in that virtual space, because it is so particular in how you have to design it. It's very much built like for architects. Whereas like in Rhino, you could just make this weird abstract organic thing and not worry about how you're going to build it until like way later. So each one has its own, its own skill set or, adaptation that helps out with that. But no, the Amazium was really a big trial and error for me, because you had to make something that was indestructible, because it was going to be around kids, and kids are rough with things. But then it also couldn't kill the kid, right? So it had to be, it had to serve both purposes. Because, and you're also like dealing with like the longevity of the exhibit too. You wanted it to last and build it to last. And then you also wanted to keep an accurate record of how you were building this thing in case you had to go back, have someone maintenance it. You had to think about how to make things easily and accessible, or what's the first thing that needs replaced on it, and then how are you going to make it easy to go in and easily replace that for the next person. So yeah, it was a lot to learn and a lot to think about in designing. And it's more human design focused, human-centered design. It's a whole realm. That's a whole nother degree that people can pursue. But yeah, you had to think about, I'm designing this thing for this child to sit in, and they're only like 36 inches tall. You can't make the chair to be like 48 inches tall, so you had to think about like how people were going to actually interact with it, on top of how to make the thing work, because a lot of things were kinetic and interactive. So yeah, so you're thinking about a lot of things as you're designing those, and it's a lot of prototyping too, because a lot of things don't work. So how can you easily build a thing very cheaply just to try it out? No, and then how do you build the thing in a cheap way to end up on the floor, people play with it, and then you kind of watch them and see what doesn't work and what does work. So because children are going to play with something very differently than what we would.
Right. Oh, that's such a cool though immersive experience into, I think, this like exhibit design and human-centered design. And I feel like it's such an encouragement that and it was so like brave of you to just read the job description. You're like, yeah, like I can do a lot of these things. And so I'll figure it
Yeah,
out.
I mean, it's also during COVID. There wasn't a lot of jobs either, and
Yes.
I knew I needed something to pay the bills. So yeah, and I loved that it was a job that still allowed me, the versatility to use my background and experience and bring something fresh too, because they had never hired an artist. And it was one of those goals of like, I'm gonna make them say we should have hired an artist sooner, and it only took like 3 months for them to finally say that. So
It seems like such a natural pairing. That's amazing that you were the first artist to sign on.
yeah, and they had a lot of makers in residence, but they had never really hired an artist to fulfill that role. So that gave them a new insight into how versatile artists are.
Yes, and I think that if there was going to be any first artist though, what a perfect pairing with your focus on the body and how things move. And like, yes, these are kids' bodies, but their bodies nonetheless, and they're going to be interacting in a space. And so it all ties really, I think, poetically into
Yeah.
like who you are as an artist. That's awesome. I don't want to miss the chance to talk a little bit more into that time near the cornfields with the horseradish. First of all, I loved how you described, you said you were exposed to horseradish festivals. Was this a pleasant experience? Was it traumatic? Do you like horseradish?
I didn't realize I said that. No, I love horseradish.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I love horseradish sauce and all those things. And how it burns your nose. I'm all for that.
So fun.
But yeah, so I mentioned like the ketchup bottle festival and the horseradish festival and Italian fest. We actually low-key called them the drunken stupors, because it was mainly just like an excuse for people to get drunk. So that's when I say exposed.
As it happens, I said.
Yeah. So
I lived in Chicago for a little while, and at that time I loved like little weekend road trips. And so I don't remember where it was, but there's some town in Illinois where they have, and maybe there's probably more than one town, but there's a town that had a lawnmower parade. So like I went to the lawnmower parade and they decorated them, and it was like, this is so cool. I don't remember what they were celebrating, but there was like a 5K in the morning and like a lawnmower parade in the afternoon, and it was a great experience.
oh
I
man,
love Illinois.
that's a little more Midwest than what Illinois was, or like Collinsville. I forgot to say Collinsville is also like 15 minutes from St. Louis, so
Okay,
um
yeah, so
yeah,
very
so I grew up it's an interesting place because it feels rural, like a rural area with all the cornfields and everything, but it's so close to St. Louis that it has a suburban feel.
so cool.
So yeah, it was a weird situation growing up, and then it's right on the Mississippi River. So you're always crossing this river on these big bridges. I think that's one of the main things I miss about like miss being in this area is just like crossing a bridge with water. Like it's so weird. I'll drive home all the time to see my parents, and I'll drive over the river, and I was like, I missed you.
I
It's
get
weird.
that.
I
Yeah.
didn't realize it was such a big part of my life.
So, like water is just so impactful.
Yes.
It is
Also, yes, it is. Like we grew up on my parents had a lake in their backyard. Some people around here would be like, that's a pond by that definition. But I was like, it's a lake. It's not quite Beaver Lake, but it's a lake.
like,
So you'd always have like swans and ducks and stuff in the backyard, and the swans would chase off the geese every time they flew in. And
what a
then
picture.
yeah, so water is always a big part. So I'm very fortunate that like I live right next to Lake Fayetteville, which has been a super like I feel home when I go there because it, just being surrounded by the lake is just
And it's huge. It's
my
surprisingly big.
jam.
Like, I've never walked
Yeah.
around the whole thing. Like,
Oh my gosh, yeah, I love walking around the whole thing.
okay, I'm motivated now. I'm gonna have to do it.
Yeah,
I'll let you know what it's like. But my more on topic question, the reason I went
very
back
good.
to your childhood was, you mentioned you were drawing at the time, right? You were into like the 2D
Oh yeah.
world. What were you drawing? Were you drawing the swans and the geese? Were you drawing them from your head? Like, what was that like?
Growing up, for some reason, I was really into horses. Like I drew horses a whole lot growing up.
Okay.
Um, and dragons. I remember drawing dragons a lot. And then high school got super into anime. A lot of my friends did. We even at our high school had an anime club, and we just like meet every Friday and watch anime. And then we all got into cosplay during my junior and senior year. So we were making these like awesome elaborate costumes and everything. I made a giant mech suit, and at the time I was like, I'm not a sculptor, I'm a drawer. No, and that was the
You're
point
like,
where
this
it was
was
like
sculpting.
it's like that's when you're deconstructing a whole entire like 2D animated thing and actually like assembling each individual piece with like foam and hot glue, and you're making this thing happen. Yeah, I was a sculptor. I didn't know it, but
Gosh.
yeah.
That's so cool. Like your subconscious was telling this other story. You're like, oh, you wait, Shelby. Like you're not a sculptor yet. You
Seriously,
will be.
seriously. Yeah,
So
yeah.
you went into college and you had this background of drawing horses and dragons and making cosplay outfits. Before that sculpting class, did you think you were going to go on kind of with that, um, that subject area? Were you like leaning into something different at that point?
So with art education, it had you had to have a focus group for that particular program. And then I had taken ceramics, sculpture, and then I ended up needing like one more sculpture credit. So you only needed like 3 studio classes in order to declare that as a focus. So I was like, I'll take this last sculpture class and that'll just be my focus. I know drawing's my thing. And then I had class with that Duake, and I was like, well, that's it. Okay.
Wow, it's so
Yeah.
cool how one person, right, or one moment in our time, like life, can just change everything about how we see the world and what we want to
Yeah.
be in it.
And I didn't even get into we had a sculpture on campus program too that every summer we would build these massive sculptures and put them outside, and it would have we'd have 12 finalists, and we'd put you'd submit a proposal and then get selected, and then you had a little stipend in order to create your piece, and then we'd install them. That was magical. yeah. And it was like after my first sculpture class, the first application came out, and I was like, yeah, I think I'll do this. This will be really good for my portfolio. And then that's when I really got into it. I made this. The first one was a giant spine with a rib cage, so people could walk through the rib cage. And then the second one, I actually went back to Tennessee and interviewed chainsaw carvers and asked them how they go about, carving a log. And then I asked them, so how would you carve a person out of a log? And they're like,
And they're
honey,
like, call the police. Like, are you okay?
no, that like how would you chainsaw carve a person? And then they're like, honey, I've been doing this for 6 years. I wouldn't even attempt that. And I'm like, but theoretically, because I have to do this, so I ended up teaching myself how to chainsaw carve. I think that's that third piece that you sent me. It's the man kind of hunched over with all the steel cords and everything. But yeah, learned how to chainsaw carve, and then kind of had they have angle grinders that have different coarse bits on them, and just kind of refined all the details in them, and then welded a base for it. So that was the second sculpture on campus, and then there was a third one that I did, which was, I think it was over like 5,000 feet of steel that I like hand bent and then like welded together. It was kind of absurd, but it was like, my mom always calls me Rosie the Riveter. She's always like, go get him, Rosie. But that was a point where I was like, yeah, I could see it. Because I was just bending all these rods and just welding them. But it was a magical time because it was like 12 people were making these massive sculptures all at once, and then we would install them, and then we'd have a sculpture on campus walk, and then everyone in the community would come, and we would give our our little elevator pitch about like, this is what the piece is about. So it was great.
I think that's such a great way too to show up on your campus, right? Like I remember being an undergrad and feeling, and I at NYU, like you're one of 10,000 like in your year, right? Like you're just like a dot in this pool. But you're building these massive things that are part of your landscape. Like what a cool way to show up, right? As a student and as a person who's shaping this experience for not just you, but everybody. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, and two of the pieces are still on campus. The chainsaw carved man is actually that piece just keeps evolving on its own. Like it has its own narrative now because the whole piece was about like it was at a point in time where I noticed like everyone was kind of neglecting each other because technology and phones. And I remember we were sitting at an Applebee's. This is so Midwest. We're sitting at an Applebee's, and the parents had like, the kid was like throwing a fit and throwing silverware around and stuff, and all they did was pull out their phone, start a movie, and the kid was just like, and I was
zombified.
I was like, what is this going to socially do to our society if we're, just like so disconnected and can't resolve conflict, and so we just throw on a distraction. So a lot of that piece was about like, is technology helping us more than it was hurting us at the time? And then now nature came in and said, oh no, I'm the conversation. It started to completely rust the base. And then the chainsaw carved man has grown fungus to the point of it's growing shelf fungus and shelf mushrooms. Like it's growing it on the side of it. I think it's gorgeous. My mom's like, when are you gonna fix him? She's like so distraught, and I was like, there's no fixing this one. Like his whole shoulder actually this year has started to cave in because the fungus has started to eat away at the inside. So it's just such a magical, like horrifying thing to watch. But I don't know. It has grown literally and figuratively.
He's evolving with the world around him. This is a natural progression of evolution of the human.
And then when I was home for COVID, like it's hanging out in my parents' backyard now, by the lake. And of course, when I was home, the lake flooded like crazy because it had rained like 8 inches. So it covered up the circuitry like on the bottom to where it looked like he was just on this raft And I was like, oh, nature, now you're doing the global warming conversation. Like it just every year. Or it'll get covered in snow and ice and icicles. And it's incredible how much that one changes every year.
Oh my gosh, he's just showing up for the conversation, whatever the conversation may be, he is ready. Your sculpture
Oh,
is
yeah.
ready.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's so cool. So
Nature's been winning.
as it does, as we really realize too late, it does win. So it sounds like, different parts of your style and your approach to your work were really present from the beginning of your immersion into the sculpture world. But I'd love to hear, more specifically from you about these ideas. I read on your website, right, there's you identify as being at this like cross-disciplinary kind of intersections of
Mhm.
sculpture, installation, and performance art. I know that the body is a focal point for you in your work. I'd love to hear more about what that means for you.
Yeah, so I think a lot of the bodily work came in. I'll be like every artist. My origin story happens with myself first. I don't know. Uh, you're your own best reporter sometimes. But I don't know. I've grown up with a lot of genetic issues. We inherit a lot of things from our parents, and then years later they're like, "Oh, I have that problem too," or your aunt or your uncle or whatever, they have that too.
Mhm.
My brother and I are very unfortunate in that like everything that every single relative has, we have inherited. So a lot of it has been like navigating my own body. So one example is like I suffer from chronic constipation, and
Mhm.
I have since I was 18. And then finally I was like, Mom, this is stupid, we're going to the doctor. And then the night before she's like, are you sure? It's like, what if they make you do a colonoscopy? And I was like, I don't care, we're
I
doing it.
want
Let's
answers.
gonna talk to an expert. And then at 18 I had my first colonoscopy, and it completely changed my life and how you know but it's funny now because I think it was a year or two ago my parents were due for their first colonoscopy, and I was like, well, if an 18-year-old can do it, you can
You
do
can
it.
do it too.
Yeah, so then now I just take Marilax daily, and it's completely changed my life. Like everything's normal now. But it's like that, trying to figure out what your body needs, and also being able to identify that something's wrong with your body. So as I've gotten older, I've realized uh I've been better at identifying what my body needs, and then I've been better at listening to my body, if that makes sense.
It
So
does, and it's kind of like it's a very friendly, like, wake up call, like, slap in the face for me because I run away from it like nobody's business, like, that like, a headache is so scary to me. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I'm definitely not going to WebMD," but I'm also, like, not going to the doctor because like, I'm gonna pretend it's not here. Like, I think that the way that you blow it up, like, you make it bigger and you, like, hone in is really,
yeah,
really good.
yeah, and that's kind of I talk about that a lot in my thesis dissertation, that for me, like, in order to know how something works, I have to know every part of it. Which goes back to like the building and construction of exhibits and things like that. Like I need to see the whole picture before I can understand the little part of the picture, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, and I think from your perspective, like, I don't know. I think also if we talk about like we could talk about money and monetarily, and how messed up the healthcare system is and how
Mhm.
expensive it is, but I think that's one facet of it. But I think mine approach is more from a not a like a mortality or memento mori standpoint, but it's more of I think just listening. I think that's the main part, is just like listening to the body, identifying. Uh, so like one thing was just like a dietary change for me was realizing like nuts and fiber, I just can't eat it anymore, or I have to eat it moderately, or else that affects my stomach. Who would have known? Because
Right.
that's supposed to help everything, right? Nope, it does the opposite. And then like I don't know, it's kind of weird because like I've become the oracle for intestinal problems. So I have like my family and my grandma, my brother, and all of them coming to me like, it's still not working, what do I do? And it's like, you must wait 3 days. Like I don't know, it's weird. it's weird to be the one that knows for once, because I'm the youngest too. I'm the youngest in my family.
Wow. That's so cool though. And I get that my sister is the youngest, right? But for her, it's not our body, it's the weather, right? She's very weather aware. She's always like, Cara, be weather aware. Like there's a tornado warning like 300 miles from you. And I'm like, I can't, these are not things I can worry about, but I'm glad you are, because I know you'll call me and I'll put my helmet on
Oh
in the
man.
bathtub or whatever you do in this tornado.
How am I not in the bathtub?
I don't know. Like, this is not my, like, we know hurricanes in New
That's
York.
right, because you're in New York, right?
Right. So, but I get that, like, and it allows, I can see in her how she shows up with a different confidence, that she has this knowledge that the rest of us are really naive to, like dangerously naive to probably. But that's so cool how you get to be part of your family in this special way, because you can help them uniquely with all of their intestinal
Oh
questions.
man. Yeah. Just the weirdest thing ever, but yeah. There's like this weird, and then there's the gut pun of just like gut feeling and all these other things that go alongside the work. But yeah, I feel like those are the low key things that are the little nuggets that I don't talk a whole lot about in my artist statement, but they're present. I can't avoid them.
So cool. I just feel privileged that we went through this. I do remember though, in your artist write-up stuff, you talk about these like 37.2 trillion cells, right? In the body. Like, what the heck is that about? Like, tell me.
Yeah, so I think that goes back to me having to know how everything works before I know how the one thing works. So my last sculpture on campus was mainly about being humbled by all these different systems in our bodies that make our life possible, which is insane, right? There's 37.2 trillion cells making you function daily. That's unfathomable, right? It's like if we try and think about the universe and all the different star systems and everything in it, like your brain just starts to melt a little bit. So I feel very humbled in knowing that, like, I can't talk to you, George, in my wrist, but like you're making me be able to move my hand. I think it gives me chills. So
oh my gosh, for sure. And it is like the galaxy. It is one of those things we can literally touch it, but we can't really.
but we can't know, which is also another weird thing of like when something goes wrong with your body, like you can't just tell your cells, or like a lot of times like we're in COVID right now. You can't just tell your your white blood cells, hey, go fight that thing for me, please. Right. It's all on a genetic and cellular level that we can't even read, except unless there's a microscope and enzymes. Like,
it is stuff, and
it's wild. Yeah.
Yes, I can understand. There's so much anxiety with COVID too, right? It's just one immediate example, because we can't tell the cells to do the thing. But I think that the way that you see it, and the way that you present it, is also so maybe can bring peace to know that like it does its thing, like it figures it out. Like we don't have to think about it or ask it to fight. Like
and I mean, there's that side of like the fragility, right? So we're talking about the fragility of like it can do its thing, it can repair itself, like all of those things of the body are just phenomenal. But then there's the horror side of it where it's like, oh, it's super fragile, like run over your foot with the car, like it's not going to fix itself. Like sometimes we do need intervention, but I don't know, I think it's those times that are just kind of horrifying, because it's like you get this one vessel to experience life in. It's this one vehicle, and if you mess it up, like it's done, right?
Right.
So maybe that does go back to a little bit of the memento mori. Like memento mori is like a lot of artists use that to be like the harbinger of death, or like sometimes there'll be like skulls and paintings that allude to like someday you will die, is what like memento mori means. But I think I don't know. I guess I have a fear of being trapped in a body that can't function properly, which makes sense because I went 18 years without it functioning properly. So maybe I'm worried about going in reverse. Oh no, you are psychology, right?
I'm excited. I appreciate that. Next time I have like my knee hurts and I'm like, I don't feel that. That's not happening. I'm gonna think about those cells and learn more.
No. Instead you backtrack and be like, what did I do to you? Oh wait, you were sitting on an anvil and hammering for 3 weeks straight? That's
Right.
probably it.
My
It's not
bad.
it's
My
not your
bad, me.
skull, it's not your scoliosis. It's you sitting on an anvil and hammering. I actually have a piece that was like the realization that, you're my sometimes my artwork is hard on my body and I need to, realize that it is. So
Oh my gosh, it works on so many layers, so many levels of truths in these words. And as we talk more about them and more about, just the medical world, and you mentioned in the beginning, like needing a big space for something. I feel like your work should go like in the atrium of a hospital, like
I,
I
I've
think
thought
that's
of that
really
a
good.
lot too. Yeah.
I'm excited to see what happens with that, but I'm gonna pull up
I
your
mean,
website.
I know, yeah. Any hospitals listening, more than happy to talk about an
Let's talk about that
installation.
offline because I
Yeah.
have some ideas. But anyway,
Oh, that sounds great.
um, so this is amazing. This is gut feeling. This was your thesis work, is that right?
Yes, yes.
And this is the space that no one got to go to?
This is the space no one got to go to.
I would have loved that space. It's so cool.
Yeah,
So
so
I'd
so
love to
the
hear more.
yeah. Yeah, so this is the University of Arkansas Sculpture Gallery, which if no one knew, there is a gallery there. The main thing was that each individual piece fed into each other, so that they would visually link with each other. So the first one outside of the gallery was segment one. I named them segment 1, 2, 3, 4. I just kind of added that. But the one outside the gallery was really, I talk a lot in my thesis about it being the one that has this conversation, like critiques starts to critique the gallery in a sense, and all the local spaces. We talked a little bit before we started this recording
Yeah.
about in Fayetteville, there's not a lot of or like in the Northwest Arkansas, there's not a lot of galleries for artists to show in. So a lot of times you have to look into alternative spaces to show it in. Which made me really question like how important the white cube is anymore, and then also how we perceive art. So I thought a lot about like if we go to a restaurant and there's this painting, sculpture, whatever on the as you walk in, you're going to a restaurant, you find this thing, it's right as you walk in, it's pretty nice, but if that thing is presented in crystal bridges, you appreciate it way more. Like, and it made me question like, is it the atmosphere that makes people appreciate something more, or is it the actual work? Because the same thing could be presented on both platforms and then seen very differently, because people perceive that like the gallery or museum platforms, you know they're they've been peer edited by gallery curists and blah blah blah, and it's like, but really, I don't know. So I was thinking a lot about where art exists and then on what platform is it actually appreciated, uh, which led a lot to the Mount Sequoia show later, but we could talk about that in a bit. So then that piece kind of like fed into the gallery through that wall, and then you could see through the glass how it looks like it punctures the wall and then comes back up and then goes back into the wall. So there's like this unknown that's happening in between the walls. So I added some red light so that it visually looked like they all linked together. But there was like the unknown space of what was happening behind the walls. This has been a while since I've talked about this show.
It's so cool though. Like
Yeah.
there's so much to it. And I'm so glad you brought up the red light because as I was reading about this a couple of days ago, right? You talk about the lighting and like the negative space too. I don't know exactly what negative space is. Like, is it just where the things are not? Like could you tell me more about
Yeah,
that?
exactly. It is where the sculptures are not. So I was thinking about the whole space as being a blank canvas, as the white cube usually is. And then the sculptures were like the positive space, and then the negative space felt like the area where the viewer could put themselves or could be a part of the piece. So like segment 3 there, it's kind of straddling the corner wall, but like the viewer could walk under it, which is crazy, right? So a
Yeah.
lot of the show is actually breaking a lot of rules of the white cube, where like everything has to be at 60 inches eye height. Nope, not in this case. It's just doing what it wants. And then segment 4 there, it has enough space for the viewer to even walk under it and through it. And then there was a whole cave installation that was on the other side of this. And then the cave, actually, the viewer could walk through. And the cave on the one side where the windows were, it was a mirror. Mm-hmm. So the viewer could see themselves reflected in the show. So they were actually a part of the show. And inside the walls of the cave was a microphone, and it actually recorded whatever sound you made in that space, and then it had speakers above it that would play it back at a delay. And then also it played with the pitch a little bit too, so it felt like you were in this very voluminous space.
So cool.
Kind of started to tie everything, and then it also made the viewer feel like the exhibit was listening to them. Hey, we're back to listening. What? Oh my gosh, I always love these interviews and like
they're so fun
because I find new things about my work too.
I'm so glad that you feel that way, and I'm having so much fun understanding it from your voice and not just your website. Like your website does an amazing job, right? Sometimes I go into these and I'm like, I don't really know who you are, but like we're gonna have fun. But I have this like beautiful background, but also now to contextualize it with your story it's awesome. So the work gut feeling, like this color is awesome too, of the pieces in the space, right? If I like took apart my body right now, would it be that color, or like what is like I don't even know, I really don't even know, like or where does this color come from? What was that about?
Yeah, I think it was definitely geared towards and a lot of my thesis hides at like gut, even though gut is in the title. I think I talk about them being tubular forms, mainly because it didn't pin it down to just being about intestines, even though gut's in the title. Full disclosure. But I talk about it because through this process, I realized every system in our body works through tubes. If you think about it, our nose, our throat, our ears, our intestinal tract, like our veins that pump blood, they're all tubular. Like it's crazy to think about. So I don't know. I thought about it, and I was also thinking about the intestinal tract. I actually have worked with pig gut before. I worked for a metalsmith when I was finishing. While I was working at Lowe's, I worked for a metalsmith, and she worked with pig gut, and she made pig gut flowers. And when it dries, it is gorgeous. It's like see-through paper that has a little bit of a yellow tint, and it doesn't have any smell once it's dried. So I don't know. I definitely don't think our intestinal tract would not be this red. I don't know. I'm just spitballing, but
it's vibrant, right? Like it makes an impact.
Yeah. And I always write about it being loud. Like they're very loud forms. Like they demand attention in a way that like I don't know. I don't know if it's because I'm a woman sculptor. Some people have speculated that they're just like, you're a woman sculptor and you're taking up space. And I'm like, I don't want that feminist conversation. I think it's, you can make that conversation for me, but yes, I am a woman sculptor welding, and yes, that's very strange for the art world. Still these days. But I don't know. I wear many hats.
All the hats.
All the hats.
I am going to quote you. So in your reflection on this, on your site, I think you say like it stirs humbleness in the viewer by tugging on this string that connects all of us. And I love that idea of coming in and being humbled by this really powerful thing that you can't quite maybe make sense of right away. Or like you have like ideas about like things it reminds you of, but it's still like kind of abstract when you first get to see it. Can you speak to that kind of humbleness?
Yeah, I think a lot of that, the forms, let me start with the obvious. We all have intestines, we all have these systems, and we all operate the same underneath the skin for the most part. There's cases where we have to, do some interventions to make the body work properly, but for the most part, like, we all function very similarly. So it felt like in that sense, the show is very inclusive for everyone, which I loved to have that angle in the show. But as far as like being humbled, yeah, these forms were just, they, like segment 4, wrapped itself around you and you just wanted to hug it. And I get that reaction a lot of just like, people are just like, can I touch it? Can I hug it? Like, I actually have my a friend who is sometimes my assistant and helps me install these. And I was like, on your resume, you have to put professional gut hugger, as we're like carrying these things around. But it is humbling that like I got to include the viewer as a part of this exhibit. And it felt like their interaction with the forms actually finished the pieces in many cases, especially the cave, like having the show listen to you and then you also being reflected in the show through like the mirror film. It's something that art has, I don't know, it feels like art lately hasn't done that for the viewer.
Yeah, it's been a weird time for art. But I think that too, like, you could not have predicted it, right? But the humbleness kind of transcends the exhibit itself with COVID happening, with not getting to have people see it, right? You have the one
Yeah,
level of breaking
yeah.
the white box and then the white box disappearing because no one can go there. And then finding other ways to share the story of the work. That's wild. Right?
Yeah, it's yeah. Yeah, no one could have predicted COVID, but it felt like this show was about the viewer's body in relation to the forms. And then it transitioned, and I talk about it in kind of my epilogue of my thesis dissertation, that because I had the opportunity to go back and reflect on COVID and how it affected the show, because a lot of this thesis, as you're writing it, you're just speculating what it's going to look like in the end.
Mm-hmm.
And then going back, it was like, maybe, I don't know, everyone had to start assessing their body in relation to everyone else's body. So it felt like the show was like, I didn't have to do this, but I don't know. Yeah, it really made everyone else like start to see the work differently. Because I feel like people don't really interact or notice their bodies until something's wrong. And I wanted this to be more about being humbled by the body daily, right?
Yes.
Like, it's a wonder that it recharges itself when we sleep at night. Or, how does the hamburger go from like becoming energy to fuel us? Like, that's incredible.
It's incredible.
Absolutely incredible. And a lot of times we don't even stop and think about what it's doing for us.
No, yeah. And I think I can't wait to see as this work continues to live and wherever it ends up, like what it continues to mean for people as we do as a society learn more about our bodies and we confront different stressors on our bodies. It's all going to be really cool catalyst for conversation. So
Yeah, so yeah, I think in this was installed summer of 2020, and then in March of 2021 it was reinstalled at Mount Sequoia. Mount Sequoia, also known as Creative Spaces NWA, and in that space is a very domestic space, so it had a fireplace and wood trim, wood floor, so and lots of windows, tons of windows, so very much more of like a domestic space than the white cube, so alternative space installing in there. And the show just evolved, similarly to the man sculpture, like it evolved in a very different way. And I made a few additional smaller intestinal pieces that continued this line all the way around the room, going in and out of each individual wall and going back in. And I called it somewhere between chaos and serenity. Sorry, X-Men, I did steal it from there. But it made me really think about like COVID has been a time of like a huge time of reflection, but also it's been pure chaos this whole entire time. And then somewhere in between, there's just this moment of like bliss. And at nighttime, that show was horrifying to look in the window and see these giant intestines. But I don't know. I just felt like it was just constricting the room, and it felt like we had been in isolation for so long that, you know, the domestic space no longer felt like the safe space
Yeah.
that we originally, you know, attributed it to. And then another artist, because it was installed in the same space that I have my studio, and a few other people have their studios in the same building. And one of the artists was like, no, I didn't feel it as constriction, I felt it as a hug. And I was like, oh my gosh. So I love that other people are seeing it differently too.
That is so cool to get to have that conversation bloom from it being in a new space with new exposure.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, and in this case, people got to see it, and it felt like I finally had closure for my thesis, which not a lot of people got to have. So, yeah.
oh, I'm so glad that it didn't end there, right? That it continued forward and that the closure was had. And your work takes up space in so many wonderful ways throughout Northwest Arkansas. I'm really excited to learn about this one. This was like with or at Interform or something to do with Interform. Is that right?
So this piece is titled Brittle. So this one was in conception when I was an undergrad. So I had a wood burner and a t-shirt, and I was wood burning holes into this t-shirt, and then I dipped it in plaster, and I was like, these are great. I made 5 of them in 10 hours. And then I never touched it again because I was like, there's no way. There's no way that a giant installation like this could work. And then Interform, which used to be Arkansas Art and Fashion Forum, their name now is Interform. They're the intersection between art and fashion. They had their first kind of runway show post-COVID in downtown Springdale, and they took over the whole entire town. So they had 6 different sites for installations of artwork. One of them was at Cash, which used to be, I think, the Ozark Theater or something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah, it's right off Main Street. And then there was a few other buildings. My installation happened to be in the 2nd floor of the First Security Bank.
Wow.
So Robin, who's the CEO of Interform, she actually curated this show, and it's titled Yes and. And after seeing the space, I was like, hey, I have an idea. Are you on board with this? So I sketched up what it would look like, and she's like, yeah, do it. So it was, and we got stipends too. So they actually paid us to install all of our work, which is phenomenal. I've been also humbled by this area and how well they've been treating artists. Yeah, that was not a thing in St. Louis. It could have changed in the last couple of years, but just for them to, you know, start thinking about artists as like, we need to eat too, instead of just being like, well, just come and do the thing.
Yes. What is that trendy thing now? It's like exposure does not pay the bills. Like that is different, right? Like that's
yeah. And I think that also comes with like everyone's appreciating everyone's time way more. And they're starting to actually like work more often with artists and realize how much time it takes to make these things. So this installation came back up in my mind. It was actually going to be way smaller. I was thinking like 20 pieces, and then I saw the space and I was like, this has to be the entrance piece for this show. So this is right as you come in the door. Right. So actually the whole thing was upstairs. So there was these steps that you came up, and as you came up the steps, it had the title Yes and then next to it I had a few pieces that looked like it was, you know, ascending the steps with you. And then you'd walk in the door and then you'd see this massive installation. So again, it felt like the piece was puncturing the wall. So it felt like it was a part of the space. and then also mimic the flow of the person moving through the space too. So I was thinking about the viewer's body in relation to how they were going to move and navigate into the space. And I left these cavities below so that the viewer could walk in and out of the piece and really start to get immersed in it. And then this piece, I obviously upgraded from, the 5 pieces that took 10 hours to make because of digital fabrication. So all of this fabric was cut on the laser and then dipped in plaster, and it's 200 pieces that were cut on the laser in 4 hours, which is phenomenal, right?
Yes.
It took me 10 hours to make 5, and then it just fast tracked the process so much to where like it makes the vision work. But then there's that aspect of like a lot of these forms repeated themselves in the laser files and when they're getting cut out, but when they're dipped in plaster and then draped over different pieces, and then as they harden, they morph into different pieces. So they each have their own individual character, and they start to keep that artist hand, which I really like. So anytime I'm working with digital fabrication, I always try and mask that I'm doing it. Because I like the artist hand. I want people to know that like it's not just I pushed a button and it made the thing. I don't know. It goes back to like me really liking labor when I'm like making my work, because I think it goes back to the body, right?
Right.
It goes back to my physical, my physical vessel is making this thing.
Yeah, that's so cool. And so it's called Brittle, right? And I can see where that comes from with like how it just like shows up. But I also feel like there's a lot of significance in the naming of your things, right? And it works on all these different like, is there more? What are you thinking about when you think about this piece being brittle? How does this relate to the body, or maybe it doesn't? Like that's fine. I'm just curious.
Yep. So I also have this piece is a part of a larger series that's called The Breakdown. So it's about the breakdown of the body over time. And a lot of this manifested from 2 of my other pieces that were a chair and ladder. And in undergrad, I was excessive with drilling holes into things, and there's a table and ladder, and I drilled all of these holes, and it mimicked osteoporosis of the bones. And I purposefully engraved it into the wooden chair because they're supportive objects. So the viewer, in viewing them, goes like, "Oh man, that ladder! There's no way you could stand on that ladder." And then it gives you the same sense of like insecurity as someone with osteoporosis. Like there was, for instance, the ladder piece was completely carved down to the point of like it looks like it's going to fall apart just by you looking at it. And that was influenced by someone with osteoporosis, and their quote was, I broke my rib just like that, just by bending over. So it's like, it's horrifying, it's beautiful, and it's crazy, right?
It's
like
crazy.
it goes between those two dualities of like being humbled by it, but then also being horrified by it,
Right.
because it can break down so quickly. And then this piece definitely mimics the same visual line, weight, and structure of the chair and the ladder, and then the plaster in this installation definitely mimics bone by how bony it looks.
Yeah.
But then I wanted them to look like they were all used to be a part of a singular piece, and then now they're all separated and they're all individual parts. I've also had people talk about it as like being a bloodstream too. It's all of the blood cells in the stream, and they're all just flowing too. So there's multiple ways to read it.
Yes. It's so
Yeah.
engaging. And I think it's really cool that it does kind of guide a person through the experience, because this is part of like a journey through Springdale to art, right? So it's like, yes, come enjoy, but keep going because there's more. And that's really cool.
Yeah. And they were having, the runway show downtown too. And I was thinking about like, oh, the models and how they're walking through this, runway. So it almost gave the viewer one way to walk through as
So
well. So
fun. Yes.
yeah.
And so as you started to share about this piece, you said that Robin like brought you to the space, right? She showed you what was going on. Um, had she had you in mind, to do this work? Was there an open call that you had to kind of
Yeah, so it
do?
was
What was that like?
yeah, it was a submission process. So we just submitted proposals or different pieces, and I submitted a smaller version of this because I had it in mind, and I was like, yeah, I got a laser. Now's the time. I really do want to try this piece. And then I saw the space and I was like, so Robin, what if it's like 20 feet long? And she was like, yeah, do it. It's like, yes. You never have a curator just say do it. Like she's incredible. Like
She's
everything.
incredible.
Yeah. And there's a lot of really amazing gallery curators in this area that are just like, yeah, do the thing. I trust you to do the thing, which is like revolutionary.
So important to stay in our own lanes, right? So that people can do the thing that they are really gifted at, with the fullness of the vision that they've had for it. So I'm really glad to hear that you had that
Yeah.
experience. And so you found, my background is in operations a bit. That's what I did before this like social work life. And so I'm always curious about, how it gets done, how people were aware of the opportunity. Like, you applied to this open call to possibly have an installation, but how did you become aware that it was happening, right? Like, do you stay tuned? Like, how do you stay tuned into these opportunities that you might
Oh,
have?
that. So this can roll into a much bigger conversation because right now I'm a fashion designer for Interform.
Oh, so
We didn't even touch that yet.
oh my gosh.
Yeah, so I first started. Oh gosh, I ran into Interform when they were still Arkansas Art and Fashion. They were donating masks to hospitals and things like that right when COVID hit. And then that's when I was in limbo. I was supposed to install my thesis that weekend. That campus closed. And then I was in limbo for 3 to 4 months. And all I could do was write my thesis, which was horrifying. And that's why it's 40 pages instead of 15. But like, I was ready, like everything was ready. It was just sitting in the classroom. And 3 to 4 months. And I was going crazy by the, I was doing the 14-day quarantine thing. And it was like by day 7, I was like, I can't take it. I need something to do. And then someone posted online. They're like, hey, Arkansas Art and Fashion, they're making masks. And I was like, now's the time to learn how to sew. Because I've always been horrible at sewing. My mom, my aunt, and my grandma, phenomenal sewers. Like, they do quilting. My mom does counter cross stitch. I can't tie a knot to save my life. So then I was like, maybe I just haven't had the time and space to do this. So as everyone else did, maybe everyone else did, when everything went into lockdown, you go to the liquor store, you buy some whiskey, and then you pick up a sewing machine, right? And then I happened to borrow a sewing machine. I didn't have one at the time. And I started making masks while drinking whiskey. And they had all the patterns online, so I downloaded the patterns, started cutting fabric out of anything I could find in my apartment, and then just started making masks. I think I ended up making almost 80 masks by the end of it, before the sewing machine didn't like me anymore.
Oh my gosh.
And I got pretty good at it. And then this opportunity came up. So I was already in tune with like what they were doing for their mask things. In the meantime, they changed their thing to Interform. And then I saw they had an open submission for artists for this crazy show thing. And I was like, that sounds interesting. I'm just going to shoot them a couple pictures. And they were like, we want to know more. And I was like, okay. So that's how that happened.
Good testament to people though, of like, it's important to be involved in where you live or in the thing that you do or things that are tangentially related to it, because that community is going to be what supports you, right? Or what creates opportunities for you. And so it ended up perfectly that you did lean into mask making and found Interform, and then this opportunity came. And
yeah, and then this came up, and then it rolled into it was a little bit after I got done with this, and I had emailed Bosna, who is the kind of fashion and apparel person for Interform, and she handles some of the educational things that happen, and emailed her, and I was like, hey, I'd really like to give back. You guys have given so much to me. I'd love to give back to the community. And, I would love to work with a seamstress and learn how to, and we worked together to teach a sculpturable wearables class because that hasn't been offered to the community. And then she was like, oh, I'd love to hear more. We should have a meeting. So we had a meeting, and then in the meeting, she's like, so how about you prototype this for NWA Fashion Week in the Emerge 3 program? And I was like, so you want me to be a fashion designer and do this thing? And she was like, yeah, you can prototype it during the thing. So I started the Emerge 3 program, I think last August. We just wrapped up in December. And in that class, I learned how to take people's measurements and then actually make the patterns based off of people's measurements. So I've gone from no experience sewing to now pattern making.
But that cosplaying is coming in handy, maybe.
It is in a really crazy, insane way. And I've also thought about offering cosplay camps at the library. Stay tuned. Hopefully that'll happen.
Oh my god, the town is gonna freak out. Everyone's gonna want to be there.
Yeah. Making Gundams. But now we're done with the Emerge 3 program, and then we have NWA Fashion Week, which is coming up. It is March 10th through the 12th. And then my show Gut Feeling is going to be walking on the 11th. And the location is the Momentary.
It's gonna be such an experience. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so now we've talked about the sculpture work, but now it's transformed into more of a performative thing where the viewer is actually wearing the interior of the body on the exterior. So it's really transformed in 2 years.
That is so wonderful how you've just been open to that happening, right? And just present for these evolutions.
I mean, how do you go in a meeting and say no to making a fashion line? When you, I'm so proud of myself for saying yes, and tormenting myself with this, but at the same time, you're gonna look back and you tell your kids or your friends and you're like, one day I made a fashion line. They're like, yeah, grandma, and you're gonna be like, yes, I did.
Oh my gosh.
I don't know. I just imagine that.
I am honored to know a fashion designer. Quite a treat as someone who has always geeked out about the things we wear. This is so cool. What a fun surprise. So
yeah. And in the Merge 3 program, we learned about the history of fashion too. And I was pleasantly surprised that it correlates with the art world so much, which I hadn't thought about. A lot of cultural events that hit the art world in a very impactful way, like World War I and World War II, also impacted the fashion industry instantaneously in the same way. And they actually have a show that's coming out at Crystal Bridges next fall that's going to talk about fashion in America. So we got to talk with that curator, and she's phenomenal, and I can't wait to see the show. And she talks about that history of America and then how clothing's been shaped by its history. So
oh my gosh, that is so cool. Shelby, you're a rock star of Northwest Arkansas, of the fashion world, of the globe. It's
oh gosh,
the sky is the limit. So this one we talked about already.
Yes. So the title for that one's plugged in. So just for
so cool
reference.
Yes. And I'll jump over to this one to be mindful of your time, but I love this. I think this is so cool, and I cannot wait to hear what it's about.
We can skip it. No, I'll talk about it. Yeah, this is where I thought Fashion Week was going, but it's totally not. It's back to guts.
They keep pulling you back to the guts.
Yeah, this one's really interesting because I was actually having an allergic reaction to a medication for a whole year that I made this body of work, which is crazy. And I totally know why I made this weird body of work now. So this body of work, I also realized that I was a part of the queer community when I started making this work. So a lot of it, is talking about like sexuality of the body and really exploring the body. But it talked about the reveal and conceal of self. So in this era, I was thinking a lot about like, who do I tell that I'm queer? Who do I not tell that I'm queer? And in the long run, like no one really cared. Everyone loves me still.
Yeah.
And it was fine. But yeah, it's that like that terror like of someone like taking it the wrong way or insinuating that like you're queer, oh no, you might like me, and it's like no, that's not how that works.
No.
So yeah, and I think a lot of that was just trying to explore myself and listen to my body, just in a different way, right?
Yes.
So a lot of the installation works, what were they called? Oh, encumbered. So those, I think that first one there, that installation was in encumbered one. That was the first installation I did, and that one I was thinking about. So it used a lot of fabric and wrapping paper and tablecloths. Like I literally would go to the dollar store and just like buy anything that had a color scheme that went with each other. And I was thinking a lot like the materiality of those pieces were very important, because I was thinking about the things that we use to cover up things. So, but things that were also disposable. I was thinking about like wrapping paper or tablecloths, and like you might have had an argument with someone before you had a party, but oh, you're just gonna shove it off to the side, put it under the tablecloth, everything's fine and gorgeous. But in reality it isn't. Like some of those things that are hidden. So it was like a hidden fear, but then also like, my dad didn't take it very well, me coming out as queer. So it was like those weird conflicts. They're all really fine now with it. But it was really just like tiptoeing that space that I had never navigated before.
Yeah. So I think that like all of your work is really thoughtful, right? And personal on different levels, but this seems like deeply personal, right? Like, and in a moment
Yeah,
that was like
to the point
deeply
of like this.
powerful.
Yeah, to the point of like this work's really hard for me to still talk about. I've gotten more comfortable with it, but man, it was hard when I first started making it.
Yeah.
Yeah, mainly because like it was so sexual, and I'm just not a sexual person, and I'm just like, yeah, maybe that's why I don't make that work anymore. So no, it was just like me trying to find myself in all of this, and it was like a year of this, but then also I was having a allergic reaction to a medication for a year, and like it really put me down this weird self self exploration, I guess. I don't know.
That's
It was weird.
wild.
Yeah.
But and that's kind of, I'm curious when I look at this too, like I think some people turn to art as a means of coping. Some people maybe as a means of processing the world around them. Like when you showed up to your studio every day that you're working on this or wherever you were, um, did you dread it? Were you excited about it? Like, was it heavy when you went home? Were you just like emotionally tired? Like, I wonder if this was like, it sounds like it was maybe helpful for sorting out how you felt about this moment that you're in and what you were discovering about
Oh
yourself.
man, yeah. No, that's a really good question. How did I feel about it? I hate color. If you see the rest of my work, it's so
I was
raw.
surprised by all of the color.
Right? It's so raw. It's so much about material. It's so much about like physicality and being involved with the material. And this was just like, let's throw this up. Let's take a photo. Like it was a it almost felt like I wasn't making art because I wasn't like as involved in it, like physically. I don't know. It feels like the other duality, right? That made this
Yeah.
work. It was a good time to process everything. and also like learn more about myself. But I don't want to go back.
No,
I wouldn't go back. No.
and I think that's valid. Like that's a
Yeah.
whole thing,
Yeah.
but it it's not exactly the same, but like as I hear you describe it and what that moment was like for you and the way that like some of this doesn't really resonate with how you are an artist now, it makes me think of college. Like I think that when I turned
Yeah.
21, like a lot of things in my life were changing and I thought I had to show up in like a certain way, right? So I like you dress a certain way, you go to a certain amount of parties, like you stay out like you do all this stuff and you're like, I don't even like this. Like this is not even
Yeah.
me.
Yeah, that makes
That's
sense.
what I'm feeling here.
Yeah, that makes sense because like there's also so many hats when I came out too of like, oh, am I a lesbian? Oh, am I pansexual? Am I this? Am I that? So and then everyone like I remember going to my first kind of gay bar and then this woman coming up to me and be like, so what are you? Are you a lesbian? And it's like, what? From a community that's not supposed to be about labels, y'all like to label a lot. So
Wow.
yeah, it was a huge experience for me learning that I didn't have to label myself just because other people assume that they had to, that you know um a lot of people feel uncomfortable by queer people not having a label. But I found that like I just define myself as queer. I know that I'm not, you know, uh heterosexual. But I just I identify as queer and I'm fine with that. Like it's fine to not know.
Right.
Yeah. I at
Um,
least know the bare minimum, right?
there you go. But no,
Yeah.
I so appreciate you going here and talking about this work and the ways that you've gotten to grow into like
Yeah.
who you are in the world and how you show up from this point. And it's really insightful and cool.
Yeah. Oh
But
no.
this also was like so fun, like your photography work, and
Oh man. Yeah.
I can't wait to hear more.
Oh god. So the minute work piece, I still occasionally touch this work and make some pieces about it. Um this is the one time only, well actually these both of these, the one time only that I will dabble in feminism, but the minute work and the men working signs, they really make me very angry every time I see them, to the point of like I'm just like so peeved, because I literally do everything that they do as a construction worker, right? I'm a welder, I'm a wood carver, I'm a fabricator, I'm a CAD modeler. Like I do all of those things. And why do they get their name on the sign and not women at work or women working? So a lot of so this piece in particular, this was kind of a performance piece. They were constructing the library storage building next to the sculpture building, and they had been working on this building for quite some time. And I went over there and I was like, hey, would you guys mind giving me a tour of the space while I wear this outfit? Oh no, we're back to cosplay. Anywho,
There we
I
go.
gosh, wow. We're finding all the connections today. And then I was like, and while I, wear this outfit and have this men at work sign, and they were like, sure. And they were really on board with it. And then I came back in this get up and I was like, man, they're gonna kick us out. And they're like, as long as you're wearing a real construction helmet. So you'll see
Oh
at
my
the
gosh.
bottom photo is actually the tour of the space. So I'm wearing the real construction helmet. And then he gave me a tour, and the whole time we're filming it, and he's explaining how things are going to get constructed and everything, and he was all on board. And everyone in the whole work site came over, and we all took a group photo at the end too, which was hilarious.
So cool.
And then we did this little performance where it just so happened they had to block the bike trail, and I'm the only one with the men at work sign. So I just went down there and held a sign while they were pouring.
Oh my gosh.
But I loved this piece because it was kind of like making the sign where like the sign holder making them glamorous, but then also it was advertising just how absurd these signs were, you know?
Yes.
So
This is so cool. I loved it. Like, I think it's so special. And also, I think that that's uniquely Arkansas that they were like, yeah, sure, come be part of this. Like, if I
Yeah.
would have
If
instructions
I
to
did that in
New
St.
York,
Louis, they'd be like, get the out.
like,
Like,
mind your own business. Like, this is
yeah.
not for you. And
Yeah.
they were just like, yeah, sure. But like, could you also just help us for a second and hold the sign in the middle of the road?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. It
it's
was
one of my less proud things is that I do not know how to put air in my tires of my car. Like, this is just not something
oh
I learned
man.
as a child or as a teenager. And so in Arkansas, I never worry about it because I wait for someone else to come to the pipe thing. I just ask if they can assist. And that has nothing to do with gender or anything. It's just that I really don't know how to do it. Every time I end up detracting more air than I put in, and it takes them longer too. But so Arkansas is a very friendly place at times.
Yes.
Sometimes it is, and we can be grateful.
Oh,
I don't know if you spoke about this, but what is the material on the right side that you're
oh
grinding?
man. Yeah, a mix of a lot of things. So this one I did at Vermont Studio Center when I had an artist residency there. And this was also kind of dabbling in the feminism game. I think you summed it up quite well. When you're in school, you do some weird stuff, or you assume that you need to put on these different personalities. But this is also a point right after it came out to my parents, and I was kind of sick of them assuming that like there needed to be like a man in my life, and my grandma would always be like, did you find a man? And I'm just so sick of it. So there's my mom would say this often. She's like when I was learning how to cook, she'd be like, a way to a man's heart is his stomach. So that's the title of this piece.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and it was just like trying to mimic like intestinal structures just getting, turned into spaghetti. uh I have so many weird stories about Vermont. The actual like pasta maker, there was this man by the gas station, and he had taken everything out of his house and had it in his front lawn like it was a yard sale, and he said, no, everything's free. And I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, my girlfriend from California is going to come and pick me up sometime, and I'm just getting rid of all my wife's old stuff, and after she passed away. And I'm like, can I have this strainer thing? And he gave me that and a
Oh
few
my
other things. And I
gosh.
was just like, I guess this is the material. And then the idea just kind of started to come together. But
That's amazing. And Vermont is one of those places. I, as a like northeastern
yeah.
person, spent a lot of time in Vermont, and it is special.
Yeah, it is, yeah, whoopie pies, man. Like it's a
Yeah.
thing. Like it's so weird. It's just like this. Oh god, don't look at the calories on those either. We did that the second time we got them from the gas station. We're like, holy cow, it's like 2,000 calories in one of these. It was
Yeah, no, you
bad.
can never look at the nutrition facts on something that you enjoy.
No, it was terrifying. Yeah, so it had a mix of body and then also, exploring gender, queer self. And then also just being outraged by parents' reaction to things. But yeah, it just pushed a lot of boundaries for me, this piece did.
Yes, I can see where it would do that. And like there is so much going on that's even beyond the strainer, right? Like, or the whatever it's, I don't even know what those things are called. The thing that makes the
I think
pasta.
it's a pasta maker, yeah.
Pasta maker.
Yeah.
Yes. So that is awesome though. And it's cool to see how your work has grown from here to still hang on to some parts of it and move past some parts of it, and as it should be, right? As
Yeah.
we're learning and
Keep
growing.
growing, keep exploring.
Yes.
Yeah, I think you
Always.
summed it up earlier where you were like, the subconscious mind knows what's going on before we might even realize it.
Before we do, it's a wild, marvelous thing. So as we did a little bit of a lot of bit of a deep dive there into some specific works, but I'd love to abstract back with you to, like, why for you does art matter? Like, what keeps inspiring and motivating you? What does having art in your life mean right now?
Yeah, she asked good questions. Uh, so for me, art is just like another form of communication,
Mhm.
just like talking is. Um, so I think a lot of people, it's just another form of talking. So a lot of times people aren't very good at describing their work. I think that's completely valid and completely fine, because it's like you're trying to describe a language that has no words for it, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of times, like, I don't know, people are really hard on people that can't describe their work or, explain why it is. And a lot of times they get, they don't get as much credit for what they're doing, but it's completely valid. Trying to think of the other part of your question.
Yeah, like what keeps
Oh,
inspiring and motivating you, maybe?
keep motivating me. I found that it is kind of hard after graduating, and a lot of people have ran into this of like, where's the motivation to keep working? Where's the drive at? Because when you're in school, it's like, I got to meet this deadline, this one. I found that like I have to keep busy. So I have to have a goal in mind. So right now it's the fashion show. And then I like to apply. I like to keep, you know, keep doing 5 to 6 shows a year. So I'll be applying for things, which keeps, my website up to date, my, photos, and it keeps me writing as well. Interviews like this keep me inspired to, keep making, and then also make new connections that I might not have found before. And then it also inspires new works that happen too, because we just talked about all of these threads that like I didn't realize were there before. Maybe cosplay. Oh, that's why I'm thinking about cosplay lately. I'm making a fashion line, and then also I'm thinking about offering. I was already thinking about the sculpturable wearables, and then now I'm thinking about offering that as a a summer class for teens or young
Yes.
adults.
It's all going to fit together so beautifully.
Yeah. So I think for anyone graduating, it's like keep setting goals for yourself, and then keep doing shows. Keep the passion alive is really what it is. In my case, like I do need to stop at some point. I need to rest, but like keep going. Like that's where you really keep your drive going.
Right.
Because
But I
one
love
work,
that
yeah.
you support that with these goals that are, those like that acronym, like the SMART goals, right? Like they're specific, like it's 6 shows a year, like, and they're like measurable.
Yeah.
You can take off whether you've done that
Yep.
or not. And it is really hard to keep going, especially with certain personalities. Mine for sure, if I don't have, a vision of what keeping going means, and you kind of have to create that yourself, it sounds like.
Yeah, and definitely during COVID, like we've all had to get creative in what a show is, what a show means. It does the Crust Bucket Collective. They're a community in the ceramics department, but they created a show that traveled around, and it was just all these like little works, and they were just magneted to fridges.
Oh my
Like,
gosh.
is that a show? I think it totally is a show.
Yes.
It didn't have to be a white cube. It could be a white fridge. Who knows? Like, COVID really opened the envelope for like what's possible in the art world, and really showed a lot of artists that like galleries aren't the end all be all of where art is shown.
Yes.
Which I think a lot of people in Northwest Arkansas already know and appreciate that, because there's not a lot of galleries.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Oh,
I think another level is I'll tend to look at my resume and be like, where are my light? So maybe maybe it's shows, maybe it's solo shows, maybe it's interviews, maybe it's publications. So I'll kind of like dabble and look where is it light? Where haven't I done anything in a couple years? And then I'll try and fill that void. So
oh my God.
always professional development, like always improve yourself.
And all the introspection, like you're making sure your knee hurts for the right reason and that your resume shines in the right way. Like these are all the things I run from. So
I gotta make sure that the engine's working, right? In
right,
all
you're
the
doing those
areas.
checks when you're supposed to, when the light comes on, before the light comes on.
Yeah.
That's good stuff. So you've shared a lot of great wisdom, sage advice. Is there any other, things we've glossed over, we haven't addressed, like any lessons you've learned along the way that you think are really helpful for other people who want to do similar things to know?
I think the biggest thing for me was during COVID, I applied for a bunch of online shows that no one looked at. Like, I realized that I didn't look at the shows that I was even in, and I was like, who else is even looking at these? So I made a New Year's resolution for 2021 that I would not pay for a show or an opportunity. So a lot of times when you're applying for gallery shows or opportunities, grants, things like that, they'll have a submission fee. A lot of times that goes to, just help the gallery stay afloat or for a curator or something like that. But I decided that like in 2021, I wasn't applying for any shows that had a fee associated with it. And I still did way too much last year. It was incredible. And it's really freed me up as an artist to look at things and be like, oh, I don't have to feed into this capitalist scheme that sometimes white cube galleries get into. Which another reflection on that is some people have like gone back at me and be like, well, how did they pay for the curator and all of this stuff, and how are they supposed to stay afloat? And I'm like, they already take 40%, like they already take 30 to 40% commission off of anything they sell in their space. Why should I pay a submission fee? So that's my argument for that. Like, you're already paying them in almost half of your work, and your time and your labor. So why should you have to pay a submission fee for something like that? They should be able to get a grant to bring in an artist to curate a show if you really want to do it right. Because when you add a submission fee, you're also limiting it to who can apply for that show. Because not anyone can, economically afford a submission fee that's anywhere between $35 and $85 a show. Like, it's not sustainable. And that's what I really realized. And so in 2021, I achieved my goal. I did not pay for a show, even though there was a few that I really wanted to support. But I was like, I'm going to stay strong. You only have 2 more months. And
that is hard, right? Like when the whole world is doing it differently, to stay true to this idea that you can get by without doing that is not easy. But I think it's so wise.
Because I had to approach it a different way, where it was less about applying to these random places that, we're just trying to fill a void, to actually making community connections with people, to actually talking with people, to getting to know gallery curators and getting to know these alternative space people and being like, hey, what would look good in that corner? I think a gut would look good in that corner. So it was like a new way of selling the work too, and showing other people that like they can have art in their space too. So it started to open it up to other artists being able to show in that space. So it's creating opportunity in a way that I didn't think I'd be able to do with my work.
Yeah, I think it connects back to your idea of having these goals and objectives, right? And if you have the right objective, which is to build community and stuff like that, then the fee for show stuff just does not become the logical answer. So that's really cool. It all comes together. Finally, there's this like kind of 2 to 3 part thing that I just throw at people at the end so they get really flustered before they leave. What do you want people to leave knowing about you and about your work, and what are you looking forward to?
Oh man. So that was kind of like the video, the hot ones.
No.
Oh, you gotta look it up. That's like word for word exactly what he asks at the end.
Oh my gosh, we should be friends.
Yeah, no, it's like a whole thing. The hot ones is it has celebrities and they eat really hot wings. See, we should have been doing this while I was eating hot wings.
This is a missed opportunity.
Yeah, you gotta look it up. Because he asks some questions the whole time as they're eating hotter wings.
Oh my gosh. That ups the ante. His objectives might be different.
Yep. Can you repeat the questions one more time?
Yeah, no. What do you want people to leave knowing about you and your work, and what are you looking forward to? And that can be eating wings, or it could be something related.
I'm not a wing eater, but after all that,
veggie flour wings.
Leave people knowing about me. I wear many hats. I'm a queer woman working in sculpture and also in the field of STEAM, which is insane to say that all at once, but I feel like I break down a ton of barriers and hopefully encourage a lot of other people to try and break down an insane amount of barriers. And then also I'm a fashion designer now, which is insane. So I think the main thing, especially with the fashion line, I just finished an interview with someone else about the line, is I want to encourage people to not stop learning after graduate school. And just because, textiles and lines like this tend to fall under like a craft, and for some reason craft is, shunned by the art world, do it. Like, just do it. Like, forget what everyone else says. Like, if you want to try it out and it's going to be another medium that can inform your studio and just be another tool for you to use in your space, just do it. Don't, maybe you try it and it's not right, but at least you have that knowledge and background experience and you can pass it on to others. And what I'm looking forward to, the fashion show, March 11th. Gut feeling, it's gonna walk the runway. I just picked all my models about a week ago. They're super excited to be wearing guts. And yeah, the fashion show, and then I just got asked to do a solo show next year. Stay tuned. It's at an art and science center, so I'm super excited to see that like those two can merge together.
Yes.
So it is STEAM.
Oh my God. So cool.
Yeah, there's that. And then I think I'm doing a small installation at the Black Apple Awards next month after the fashion show. Yes. They kept changing the date, but I think it's like the 26th of March. So I'm going to be busy that month too. Hopefully I'll take a break after that. But yeah, there's a few pieces in my studio that I want to start working on again. So
much to look forward to. That's going to be so exciting. I can't wait to follow that journey on social media and all the places. Maybe I'll get to the fashion show. That sounds like so much fun, but it has been such a privilege to speak with you and get to know more about you. And I'm so excited to share your story with my little corner of the world. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. This is fantastic. And I think I said this earlier, but the world needs more of you.
Oh, thank you so much.